The 2000s were a happy time for supercars. There was new metal being launched left, right and centre. But these new cars weren't so insanely fast that they couldn't still be enjoyed on the road. And they were more usable than the supercars of the previous decades. As a result, our list of the best naughty supercars is quite long. It also throws up a question. What exactly constitutes a supercar? Are some of these cars sports cars or hypercars? Does being a supercar have more to do with where the engine is than how much performance is on offer? And if you do enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more from Goodwood Road and Racing. Where else could we start than the Pagani Zonda C12S? The first Zonda, the C12, was launched in 1999 by former Lamborghini carbon fibre extraordinaire Horacio Pagani. And who would have guessed then that it would be so popular they'd still be launching new versions of the same car 20 years later? The C12S followed a year later with a 7-litre AMG V12, which seems like a lot, but apparently not to Pagani, as not long after that the V12 was expanded to 7.3 litres. This, for us, is the best Pagani Zonda, trumping even the later Zonda F and Zonda Cinque. Why? Because the engine sounded spectacular without being deafening or relying on over-exuberant exhaust systems. And its 543 horsepower was more than enough. It had a 6-speed manual too, and everything was constructed with absolute attention to detail. If you're looking for a role model when it comes to automotive detail, the Zonda is the first place to have a look. There were faster Lamborghini Gallardos, and there were more powerful Lamborghini Gallardos, but the original remains our favourite. It looked spectacular, even today, thanks largely to the fact that Lamborghini's designers kept things simple. The prettiest Gallardos are the earliest, pre-facelift ones, before Lamborghini started fiddling with the design. Its 5-litre, 493 horsepower naturally aspirated V10 sounded superb, and unlike its replacement almost a decade later, the Huracan, the Gallardo was available with a gated 6-speed manual gearbox. It did come with an optional automatic if you wanted, but the early autocars were hideously skilled at eating clutches, and were therefore best avoided. You might wonder why it's the V8 R8 on our list rather than the V10, and we shall respond with another question. Surely you'd buy the Lamborghini if you wanted a V10. It would have the same engine, the same gearbox, the same 4-wheel drive system, and even the same steering wheel, and, to be honest, it would look better. Our choice of Naughty's Audi supercar would therefore be the V8. The 4.2-litre naturally aspirated V8 lifted directly from the B7 RS4 was an absolute peach. Moreover, it opened up a whole new audience to the Audi brand. This was an Audi that wasn't just a 4-wheel drive nose-heavy box, but a super exciting mid-engine supercar that looked at the time like something out of a sci-fi film. Because it was. The Koenigsegg CCX is where things really got serious for Koenigsegg. The development of the CCR and CC8S, the CCX was a raw engineering lunatic that could dust aside most other naughty supercars. It had a twin supercharged 4.7-litre V8 designed by Koenigsegg themselves. Previous Koenigsegg's had used Ford engines, and this one produced 800 horsepower. Power that went to the rear wheels through a 6-speed manual gearbox. A curb weight of 1,456 kilograms and a super slippery body meant the CCX could crack 245 miles per hour flat out and 62 miles an hour in 3.2 seconds. You can't get more super in the 2000s than the Bugatti Veyron. It was all too easy to get a little jaded with the Veyron as it reached the end of its life. It seemed like there were several hundred special editions, few of which were more than a paint job. But let's not forget that the Veyron was the fastest car in the world. More than that, it was the fastest car in the world while also being one of the most luxurious. Other cars might have been able to eventually match it for pace, but none felt quite so special, quite so expensive. For fun, let's run through some numbers, shall we? 1,000 horsepower from an 8-litre quad-turbocharged W16 engine. 0 to 62 miles an hour in 2.5 seconds. 0 to 124 miles an hour in 7.3 seconds. 0 to 186 miles an hour in 16.7 seconds. Top speed, 253 miles an hour. We should never, ever forget about the Veyron. When you name a car after your founder, it has to be pretty much perfect. The Ferrari Enzo, or F60, was the spiritual successor to the F40 and F50, and, at the time, the most advanced and most expensive Ferrari money could buy. If you could buy one, that is. You see, Ferrari had to know who you were, and then to decide just how passionate you were about the brand before it was decided if you were good enough to even put down a deposit. The Enzo had a 6-litre naturally aspirated V12, the same basic engine as the 599 GTB and 612 Scaglietti, but fettled to produce 651 horsepower. That, combined with a carbon fibre tub and a curb weight of 1,480 kilograms, meant it would streak its way to 62 miles an hour in just 3.2 seconds and top out at 221 miles per hour. The fastest Ferrari road car ever made? Absolutely. Let down only by its ever so slightly sluggish single-clutch automatic that would turn your clutch to dust were you to try launching away from a standstill with your foot to the floor more than 3 times in a row. But even if it was just standing still with a broken clutch, the Enzo has only gotten prettier as the years have gone by. You probably don't love the Maserati MC12, and, truth be told, there are some good reasons not to. Although built in tandem with the Ferrari Enzo, with the same chassis, engine, gearbox and so on, the MC12's hips were wider, making it less usable, and there was no rear window either, unlike the Enzo, so you couldn't see anything out the back. But who cares? Frank Stephenson's MC12 body is prettier than the Enzo, and, with just 50 cars made to the Enzo's 400, way more exclusive. The MC12 also raced, unlike the Enzo, winning the FIA GT Championship 6 times, which adds a further level of credibility and excitement to the MC12 that the Enzo just doesn't have. A potential for "it isn't a supercar" comments. The Aston Martin 177 might be a front-engined GT on paper, but when it was launched, it was the most powerful and most extreme Aston Martin road car ever made. Not to mention the most expensive, at £1.2 million. The 177 had a carbon fibre monocoque chassis, a first for an Aston Martin road car, and an achievement that wouldn't be repeated until the Valkyrie arrives in 2021, 11 years later. All of the bodywork was made from carbon fibre, and it used adjustable pushrod suspension and carbon ceramic brakes. The naturally aspirated V12 had 750 horsepower, which in turn meant the 177 could crack 220 miles per hour. In case you hadn't guessed from the name, just 77 were made. Now, we could talk about how the Porsche Carrera GT used a Beechwood gear lever, or how it was, at the time, the fastest Porsche road car of all time. But it's very, very difficult not to focus on the Carrera GT's engine. First of all, it's a V10, and one of the most high-pitched, emotive V10s ever made. Second of all, it's an engine that should have found itself in Formula One. A secret Porsche project in the early 1990s, the V10 had Formula One stardom in its sights before it was locked away when the project was cancelled. Porsche thought it had found a use for it in 1999, this time in LMP racing, but yet again, the project was cancelled. Less than a year later, however, the Porsche Carrera GT concept was shown at the 2000 Paris Motor Show, powered by that same V10. And praise be, the 5.7-litre Porsche Carrera GT went into production, launching in 2003, and became arguably one of the greatest road car engines of all time. For that reason, the Carrera GT is one of the greatest supercars of all time. Like the Aston Martin 177, the Mercedes SLR McLaren is a front-engined, rear-wheel drive powerhouse. But it was also the first road car to carry the McLaren badge since the almighty McLaren F1. The collaboration between Mercedes-Benz and McLaren, although difficult at times, did at least produce something worthy of the supercar tag. The Mercedes SLR McLaren, with its supercharged 5.4-litre V8, could walk past a Lamborghini Murcialago, and that's saying something in itself, but it could do it while you flicked between albums with your 6-CD autochanger. Perhaps installing a 5-speed automatic gearbox wasn't the finest engineering decision, the carbon ceramic brakes were tricky to master, and some of the interior plastics were truly shocking. But it had an air brake the size of a Spitfire's wing and could obliterate most other cars on the road. A supercar Jekyll and Hyde, if ever there was one. Let us know in the comments below what your favourite supercar of the 2000s was.